Welcome to Within the Valley, where we explore how emerging tech can help, heal, and empower. Today's guest is redefining what it means to lead with heart, vision, and a bold commitment to preparing the next generation for the AI era. From leading Fortune 500 companies and AI unicorns to launching a national movement for families. She's dedicated her career to building a future where young people don't just adapt, but lead, especially in the AI world. Let's welcome Amy Love, founder of Discovering AI and author of Racing Entrepreneurs. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to see you again, Vivi, and so excited to be here for this great conversation with you today.
Thank you, Amy, and congratulations on your book, Racing Entrepreneurs. I've heard so many great things, and I make tons of notes reading it myself. So it's both inspiring and practical. So, well, we got a lot to talk about. But
Great.
first, let's begin with your own journey. You are an inspiring leader in your space. So have you always been this way, a leader growing up? But I know you filed a federal gender equity case at just 9 years old. What's the story behind that, and how did it shape your view of the world?
So great question, and it is something that has played a golden thread throughout my life. And it really was, I was raised to believe that it is part of your responsibility as being a good citizen is to always try to leave things better than you found it. And when you see something that doesn't seem fair or right, to go ahead and address it, whether or not it directly benefits you or not. When I was much younger, my father worked for a public company where every time you got promoted, you moved. And one of our opportunities was to go live in Brazil when I was 7 and 8. And while I was in Brazil, I learned to play soccer pretty well, or football, as they say. We moved back to the United States. And when I was 9, right upon, returning to the United States, I tried out for an all-star soccer team. Announced to me, they were saying girls weren't allowed to play. And in fact, after I was selected for the All-Star team, the roster came back and my name was circled and the word unacceptable was written on it. And my parents sat me down and said, Amy, I know you made the All-Star team. We're excited for you, but guess what? They don't allow girls to play. And it was kind of that naive moment for me, but also a defining moment for my parents when I said, what does the fact that I'm a girl have anything to do with my ability to play sports? And it really was a defining moment for our family, which was true. Gender should not have played a role in whether or not I could play on a competitive youth sports team. So we filed a federal class action lawsuit, actually under civil rights legislation, to allow for all girls to play on competitive youth sports teams based upon public access of public facilities. And ultimately, the case was settled in our favor and we won. It's kind of funny, the case was called Love versus Steele because the president of the California Youth Soccer Association at the time was a gentleman named Ron Steele. And so I always love the fact that it is love versus Steele, and love conquered Steele in this case. And Pele came out in support of it, so I also learned at a very young age how important it is to build connections with people who believe and follow and align with your values and your directions, and that they can help you spread the word and the opportunity for others. And in addition to that, I had the chance to hold my first press conferences at 9. So, being put in a position of a spotlight at a very young age, where when my lawyers sat me down to figure out whether or not I could handle this case or not, one of the big questions was, did I realize this wasn't about Amy Love? This was actually about something much bigger. This was about providing and being able to withstand the pressure and the public perspective that may not always be favorable about trying to challenge the status quo, which was what are girls' roles in sports and boys' roles in sports. And I had the viewpoint that it shouldn't matter about gender. It should simply matter about if you're talented enough, capable enough, you have the desire, the interest, and the passion and willing to work hard enough, you should be able to participate in anything that you're capable of doing. So it definitely was a foundational moment that has played out throughout my career where I've definitely challenged the status quo. I've subscribed to the great quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And at 9 years old, I wanted to be the next Pele. I also happened to play baseball. I wanted to be the next Hank Aaron. I wanted to be the best at whatever I did, and having access to be able to do that was really important. And so if you think about what we're doing today with Discovering AI, it's got a similar thread through that. And that is, I believe our generation of young people today need to be prepared to thrive in the age of AI. And our infrastructure is not set up yet to support that.
That's such a great story. I can see that you have been a young leader growing up, and your family must be very supportive. So in this book, you
Yeah.
talk about your daughter, Maddie, a lot as well. I really admire your dedication and love for your daughter and also for her generation, the younger generation. She's a member of the Generation Glass. Like you said, kids born after 2010 and raised basically behind the screens. How are these kids different from previous generations?
Generation Glass. It was funny. I was just talking with a Gen Zer, and he was talking about he felt his generation was Generation Glass, but he was defining it from the standpoint he thought his generation was very breakable, was very fragile. I'm referring to Generation Glass in a very different way. I'm referring it to the fact that this generation has been raised from the outset with digital devices in their hands. And when these digital devices are in their hand, they have a completely different way in which they interact with the world. And so while they're digital natives because they're constantly scrolling and checking and using devices as pacifiers and play elements and communication tools, they aren't yet what I term digital leaders. And that's the big difference. So they're Generation Glass, but they're not yet digital leaders. And that is, do they really know how to use technology to create, not just consume, right? Do they know how to use technology with intention, not just instinct? You know, you can get any kid and they can just start touching every single button. They're not afraid of breaking anything. That's instinct. But do they know how to use it with intention to understand, is this information correct? Is this hallucination or not? Really being able to understand how they can leverage how AI works or technology works and how to use it ethically. Because at the end of the day, tech is a tool to help us. It is not one that should take over all aspects of our lives. So it's really about, can they even guide others in how to effectively use digital technology tools?
Yeah, I like what you said. The consumer, they are very obsessed with the screens, the tools, but it doesn't make them the creator, right? That's a really good distinction. And also, I know you graduated from Harvard, and
Mhm.
recent studies show that even Harvard MBAs are struggling to find jobs nowadays. Facing creators and not consumers, like we said, the mindset of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship could be the key to the answers. What does that shift really mean on how we parent or educate today?
Absolutely. It is fundamentally down to this mindset, I believe, in terms of what we need to instill in Generation Glass and beyond. Because I use a term about becoming AI irreplaceable. You become AI irreplaceable when you're skilled and you have the experience and you have the traits that aren't inherently advantageous to technology or AI. And so, when we think about that is like, how adaptable are you? And that also comes with resilience, right? From a human perspective, how resilient are you to keep trying? The first time you don't get it right, second time you don't get it right, third time you keep trying. It's one of the great lessons you can learn through sports. It's also one of the critical needs you have when you even use AI today about don't accept the first answer. How are you able to use prompts to dive deeper, deeper, and deeper? How are you in terms of adaptability when realizing that the jobs that exist today aren't going to be there in 3 years, let alone 5 or 7. And a whole new slew of career opportunities are going to manifest themselves. But are you adaptable enough as a lifelong learner to take those on? It's also about critical thinking and problem solving. This is going to be one of the biggest challenges for this generation because they no longer will have the same level of entry level jobs that prior generations have had to where you can learn and build the experience you need to know how to think critically and problem solve much larger, bigger, scalable issues and challenges and strategic initiatives and challenges facing businesses. So you've got to start building those critical thinking and problem solving skills at an earlier age to demonstrate that you can deliver value because you're not going to be given the same on the job training for it. It's also about creativity and innovation, right? This is really where the human mind is so powerful, is the ability to think about what hasn't yet been created, right? I mean, AI and learning models are really about learning from what has already occurred. It has the ability to to sift through massive amounts of data, but is it truly incorporating and able to uncover what hasn't yet been done? And that's uniquely human still at this point. And then there's also, the emotional empathy and leadership. Who are you going to follow up that mountain? Who is going to inspire you to put in the time and the energy to achieve something as a team or to uncover the next scientific discovery? It's going to be that leadership and that empathy and that emotional intelligence that is uniquely human. And then, when I think about these traits, we also talk about it in terms of technology, fluency, and digital literacy. Are you truly a lifelong learner because of the rate of change? Just look at how much the learning models have adapted and shifted as it relates to their capabilities and images alone. And so, where are you as an individual? Are you that lifelong learner? And the last part is really kind of this entrepreneurial mindset, thinking, and initiative. Because the reality is the future is going to reward those who are not passive. It's going to reward those who are not sitting back and waiting to be told what to do, which unfortunately in the United States is still a big part about how our educational systems are set up. One-way communications out, demonstrate knowledge, revert back the information you've learned. Instead, in today's workforce, the speed in which things are happening, how can this generation demonstrate that initiative? So those 6 essential traits, whether you start your own company or you work in a company and through entrepreneurship, apply those 6 traits. Those are the traits that are truly going to make a difference that employers are going to need. And the reality is countries are going to need to have from their own citizenship, their citizenry, to be able to drive global competitiveness.
Yeah, I think the 6 traits are great, are very essential. The question is, how do we grow and cultivate those traits? How do we grow those characters, right? You pointed out the disparity in AI education and the danger of sending kids into an AI-driven world with a pre-AI mindset. We definitely need this shift in mindset. So what exactly do families and school need to change urgently?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct when you talk about this reality of the differentiation between what different families and children have. And I think, though, one thing we need to do is take that step back and realize that there's a key part of intentional parenting that needs to come into play because we can't rely in the United States simply on the 13,000 decentralized school systems to execute at the same pace and path how we're going to teach kids how to be AI literate and how to be entrepreneurial thinkers. But this extends well beyond the US market. You look globally, and you've got China and you've got India that have taken huge steps forward in terms of ensuring AI education is happening early on from K through 12. You look at Estonia that is leading in terms of overall citizen understanding and knowledge of AI. So this is a global issue. And so you have to ask yourself the question about what is it that's going to be the defining moment or the separation for others. And so I really like to think about it from the standpoint of it's around hands-on learning, value-based frameworks, and real digital fluency. And so when we think about hands-on learning, it's about both at the parent and at the child level. Are we testing? Are we trying? Are we creating communications together? It's also really about understanding what are your particular family values around AI. There is no one right or wrong answer here. And it certainly is not a political statement to say family values as it relates to AI. Because in your family, what are your values around saying please or thank you or using a napkin or respecting authority or respecting your elders? Or what is your family values around how you approach your academic work? Some families may view from their values perspective that it's perfectly fine to leverage AI to give you the insight and the information you need early on in your homework. In other families, it may very well be, you need to try it 2 or 3 times first. Then you need to ask questions. Then, only then, if you can't find the answer, you can use AI, but then you still have to redo the problem afterwards. Whatever it might be, we need to be having these sorts of conversations around what are our values with AI? Do we automatically trust what is shared in the answer, or do we ask critical questions, critical thinking? What were the sources AI used? Does this represent diversity in thought, or is it narrow in thought? These are things when we think about what families need to do is just to start to open up the conversation they can have with their children about this.
I love it. I think there's so much to unpack. And I actually, when I read the book, I like how you share your stories with your daughter, where you encourage her to use AI, use all the tools to create her YouTube videos, and just to do a project. And just by doing this, and you give her really the safe space to explore and to make mistakes and to take risks. Right. So
Yep.
that's exactly the point of being entrepreneurial. Also, on the six traits, you mentioned EQ and entrepreneurial. So how can parents create this safe space for this kind of growth? Like you said, it has to start from the family. You can't just rely this on the education system. You need to start from yourself right here in your own family.
Yeah. When you think about it, in some school systems, they might be given a Chromebook, but the majority of that time on the weekends and evenings are going to be in the home and as the family talking about the usage of it. In other cases, for all phones and those sorts of devices, it's the families that are deciding when it's appropriate to give it to the children. So it absolutely is an essential conversation. So you asked the question about, well, what can they do and how can they create the environment? I love this story, and I'm a big um, studier of history. And I do think oftentimes history comes back. And, I'm always reminded of the story. This happened back in 1939. An American mathematician, he was a master's graduate student at the University of California, Berkeley. His name was George Dantzig. And he came in late to a class. And there were two problems up on the whiteboard. And since he was late, he didn't want to ask the professor, is that our homework? Is that what we're supposed to do? He just presumed that's what it was supposed to be, because that's usually where the professor listed their homework. Well, it took him some extra time to do those problems because he thought, wow, these are, unreasonably hard. These are much, much more difficult than what we've had in the past. So he took a few extra days and then he went in and met with his professor and he apologized. He said, Professor, I'm sorry for turning in my homework late. Do you still want it? But I did get it done. And the professor kind of just blew him off and said, just leave it on my desk. And it was several days later when the professor came back and knocked on his home door and said, do you realize you solved two famous unsolved problems in statistics? And it's all because there was no preconceived notion in his mind that these weren't solvable. And so when you think about what parents can do, it's leave the room for your children to truly explore what is possible and to not put constraints on them about what is or is not real. Now, if you don't mind, Vivi, I'm going to bring it all the way down to how this could work out with a 5-year-old. Does that sound good to you?
Please go
All
ahead.
right. So with my 5-year-old, my daughter, and mind you, as you mentioned, I've been a chief marketing officer of several public companies. I also started my career off with Procter and Gamble, really hardcore, great marketing training. My daughter at 5, after reading a book called Maisie's Lemonade Stand, she wanted to have her own lemonade stand. And as part of the entrepreneurial venture, I had her help write the signs up and I would ask her questions. I didn't tell her what the answers were. I'd ask her questions. Do you think people would rather drink lemonade out of a can, lemonade out of powder, or lemonade we'd make with real lemons? And she's like, lemons we make, lemonade we make with our real lemons. And we had a lemon tree. We live in California. There's tons of produce here. So we went out and we picked the lemons. Yes, it would have been faster for me to squeeze the lemons, but I didn't. This wasn't about me. I had done my own lemonade stands years ago, right? This was about her. So she got to learn what is it like to actually squeeze a lemon and get fresh juice out of it. And then I asked her the question, all right, and trust me, there was lemon juice everywhere, but it was worth it, right, for it to be her experience. But then I also asked her, what do you think will get people to stop? And she said, Mom, a lot of people walk their pets in the town we live in. I think we should have dog and cat treats. And I kind of caught myself and I was about to say, why on earth would we give cat treats? You don't really see people walking their cats. But in her mind, right, at 5, she was like, that's the perfect answer. So I said, okay, we'll do dog and cat treats. And so she literally wrote in her 5-year-old handwriting, free dog and cat treats. Well, it turns out she was 100% correct. And it would have been so easy for me to have squashed her mindset, squashed her creative thinking by saying nobody really walks their cat. Because what happened was customers walked by and said, oh, wait a second, I don't have a dog, but I have a cat. You're willing to give cat treats to my cat? I'm stopping and buying lemonade from you because you thought of something that I care about. And at 5 years old, my daughter, when I was at the time literally a public company, Fortune 500 CMO, taught me a lesson, which is never forget your customer. And in this case, that creativity, that room. It could have completely, like, people could have laughed that we had cat treats, but instead, it was an empowering moment for a 5-year-old to think outside the box of what a typical lemonade stand would have and offered both dog and cat treats, and it worked for her. So, what parents can do is really make sure that they're not putting their children in boxes, that they're not putting their answers in boxes. Be willing to say, let's see what happens. Let's give it a try. Let's check it out. Fuel that creativity and that ability to think about what's possible. Because, I mean, Vivi, I think you will agree with this completely, right? AI is only limited by the human imagination at this point in time. What we can dream can become possible if we know how to leverage AI properly. But if we are just raising a glass generation of consumers where they're not intrigued to be creative and think on their own about what might be and what could be and what might be possible, they're just going to consume tech and be those passive employees, passive citizens, and miss the opportunity to truly thrive in this amazing period of time that we're about to really accelerate into.
It's such a beautiful story. Not only did I hear the entrepreneurship, but also compassion and the child's innocence, right? The caring in that story. I think that's exactly what we need to encourage, to keep an open mind. And also, like you said, we need to be optimistic and hold on to what makes us human, our imagination, our heart, our compassion, and all that great stuff. A lot of parents are overwhelmed and by the speed of change. I like the scene that you described. You call the kids to come to dinner and they always like 1 second and bury their head, in front of the screens. And all the AI tools coming up every day. So what are the biggest misconceptions people have or parents have about AI?
Yeah, so I think some of the misconceptions parents have is depends on what side of the equation they're on. If they're on the side of the equation that we missed the boat with the internet and with mobile and with social, and so we got to make sure we don't repeat that problem with AI. Sometimes they come at it from the standpoint of fear and restriction and limiting their children's ability to use it. And that's a myth because technology never gets back into the bottle. So restricting use rather than talking about family values and having conversations around when should you question AI? When should you trust it? What do you use to validate? How do you acknowledge when it's AI created or not? If you miss those conversations because you've chosen to say we're going to restrict so that we don't see the same sort of challenges we've had with social, you actually have left your child ill-equipped to handle the realities of what employers and the future will demand of your child. So while you were hoping to give them the wind beneath their wings, you've actually clipped their wings and they don't have the knowledge to be able to soar high. So that's one side of the myth. The other side of the myth I find with parents is really this belief that the schools will just figure it out themselves. The schools are where the kids are going to learn about it. I'm too busy with my life. I don't need to engage. That's why they go to school. They'll get it all there. I was just with a computer science teacher yesterday. I had the chance to take our Girl Scout troop up to Stanford that has a program there called the AI Tinkery. And it's all about exposing people in the community to AI and getting them experimenting with it. And so the computer science teacher from my daughter's school joined us and I rode with her. And her comment was, it's really interesting when parents just think that it's going to be the schools that are going to teach it. And really, this is where it needs to be a partnership between the parents and the schools. And if you look at schools today, certainly at least in the United States, we have a real issue with, as I mentioned, that decentralized 13,000 school districts where there's so much pressure on standardized testing. There's very limited training. And the pipeline of new teachers coming in who are going to be more digital natives, maybe not yet digital leaders, is going to take time to permeate through those systems. So for parents to have this myth that they can just look to the schools to solve that, the schools don't have the resources, the training, and we certainly haven't put in place, like many other countries, like India, like China, a top-down approach mandating AI education. While we have a new presidential order saying AI needs to be part of the schools, it's not as easy to implement since we have individualized academic requirements at every single school district level. So that myth is really important for us to also break down. Whereas it's not a feast or famine. Even if you look to the schools to do it and think your kids will figure it out on their own because they're more tech savvy, it's in essence, you're giving them an exceedingly powerful tool without the right level of training. You would never give your kids the key to the car if you haven't taken them out with their learner's permit and talked about, do you drink or drive? Do you use controlled substances and drive? What are the rules at four-way stops? What do you do when you don't have the information? How do you change a tire if you're ever in danger? We need to take that same mindset of, would you really turn over AI to your child without those conversations? And, it's really timely, Vivi, to talk about both sides of this because just this month, Google announced that they're now opening up Gemini to kids under 13. So 0 to 12, it's now by default on. And so some parents might choose to pay someone to teach their kid how to drive. In other cases, some parents are going to both pay someone to teach and also take them out and have them show them that they know how to drive well. And then others are going to just train them all by themselves. When we think about AI, it's the same thing. That's part of why Discovering AI is here, because we offer all three levels of those opportunities for parents. We've got, these workshops and programs and learning circles that kids and parents can be part of to learn. We have shared responsibilities with parents, caregivers, and Discovering AI. And then we also offer free resources to just allow parents to take it on themselves. And those are the two myths. It can't be feast or famine. It's got to be a combination of intentional parenting from the outset.
That's interesting. Definitely a spectrum. Some parents are totally hands off. They say, okay, leave it to schools. And some parents probably are too stressed that they're too micromanage. And that's not good. That's like very delicate balance here. Like you said, how to move from fear to fluency. How do we balance the digital literacy with fundamental human skills? And I'm glad you mentioned the Discovering AI, all the workshops. So could you just shed some light on some of the basics or essence on how exactly we should do that to maintain this balance?
Absolutely. So, I think it's really important for parents to focus on how can they model this? How can they celebrate the effort, not just the outcomes? How can they let their children try, fail, and try again? It's really the messiness is where the magic happens. And so, we provide a lot of different tools to try and spark that conversation between the parent and the children. And the reality is AI is moving so fast. It's no longer realistic for parents to think that they need to be the expert first before they teach their children. Families today need to move along with this together and grow together with their outcomes. So the reality is, as they're learning about how effectively to use a learning model, parents may be asking questions more related to work or their personal family scheduling or vacation schedules, and kids may be asking it about how to resolve a conflict between two friends, over a fight that might have happened in the schoolyard. But they can ask different questions, but they can move along the continuum together. It's also really important that the conversations start. There is a situation where at some point in time, for many families, it breaks down what is the common ground conversation. And AI can really serve as a real catalyst to enable that. What we do every Friday is we put out a little easy game called Mind Spark, where we encourage parents and families and children together to work through an AI example. It could very well be one that talks about, think about, if your favorite pet could talk, what would they say about your family? And everyone gets to participate with AI themselves and let the creative juices flow, but it creates a new conversation among the family where they can start to talk about, well, was there any bias in the answer? What were some of the assumptions AI had? What did we share? How well were our questions centered? What additional information or data did we need to share for it to be valid? Parents can really model this by incorporating it into just everyday conversations and talking about how it can be used and then doing some things fun to make this an engaging family activity. And along the way, you're teaching the 6 traits of an entrepreneurial mindset that we talked about, right? Adaptability. Oh, what came back there is exactly what we're looking for. Let's kind of adapt that a little bit. Let's give it some more information. Let's do this. Well, critical thinking, does that really make sense? Why does it always assume that it's going to be a male pet versus a female pet? Or where is it? Let's ask the questions. What other information did it need? All right, how creative were we with it? Could we have been more creative and talked about, our pet looks just like our dad or our mom, or it looks just like the mailman. Being creative with these things and coming up with it. And then empathy, because when you're talking with your family, you never want to laugh at someone else's ideas, right? So how do you show emotional intelligence and leadership as people are thinking through different things? And then you're trying the different technology, and then you're taking the initiative as a family to just do something together that isn't just about consuming somebody else's social media feed. Instead, you're talking and discussing things that are relevant specifically to your family. So, that is something I think families can do, because without a doubt, they need to be modeling it, they need to be celebrating it, and we need to be encouraging kids to try. And that's a lot why we also do things around raising entrepreneurs, of encouraging kids to take on the role of trying new businesses. If I look back on my career, from my various early days, I delivered newspapers. That doesn't happen anymore. I worked at a McDonald's. You can now go to a McDonald's in Texas and it's fully automated with conveyor belts and nobody's there making the food. I worked in a retail store. Now you can walk into the mall, drop your clothes into a box. It uses, radio frequency to read the tags and tells you what the price is. You only need security guards now. I've been in marketing. You no longer need to have an entire PR company writing your press releases and doing the outreach. You can leverage AI to do the vast majority of that work, right? All these initial jobs don't exist anymore. So don't worry about your kids making a mistake. Just let them try, get the experience, try these things where they learn how to interact with customers, problem solve, come up with creative ideas. That's really where the difference is going to happen.
No matter how the world changes, the core qualities, the traits in character, the values stayed with us. That is really powerful inspiration and lesson that I learned reading this book and by talking with you is the mindset shift from passive consumer, consuming all the content, all the social media and everything, versus being a creator. So you use the tools, you be proactive. So that makes all the difference. No matter what your social status or how much resources you have, the least thing you can do is make this mindset shift. You introduced the idea family AI values framework. I like how you organize and get people together. So I'm curious, what does that look in your own home?
So in our home, we talk about the importance of not outsourcing your thinking to AI. It is without a doubt, first and foremost, the ideation and the initial discovery needs to come from you. And then you can refine it with AI and then ask it even more critical questions. That's one way we do it. In addition to that, as it relates to homework, our family values are for math. My daughter actually needs to try to solve the problem 3 times on her own. She needs to solve it twice on her own. If she doesn't do it, she needs to go back and reread the part of the chapter of her book and then try to solve it a 3rd time. If she's still not comprehending the math problems, then she can actually either use Khan Academy, or she can go use Photomath, or she can go to ChatGPT. Any one of those 3 sources, she can put the problem in, ask it to help her solve the problem, and then from there, once she gets the answer, she then has to put it aside and then demonstrate that she can actually do it on her own. And I'll be frank, I'm lucky I have a daughter who loves math. It's been a long time since I've taken algebra. She's 12, and so she's already in algebra. So I'm really grateful as a parent that we have these tools, because up until last year, I was the one staying up very late with her, relearning myself what I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
And instead, now I have tools that actually reduce friction in the household, because she's not getting frustrated with me. The fact that I've got to remember how I did algebra so many years ago. She's got a tool that is non-emotional with her about how she's doing it. So that's how it's very helpful. Another way our family value is she cannot ask AI to give her the answers to study questions, but I can use AI to help me know what questions to ask her. And this, I think, is really important when I talk about knowledge being universally accessible and how this will actually close the gaps for so many parents. I do not remember the details of the 4 books she read this year, and she just got through with finals. She read The Odyssey, she read Julius Caesar, The Tale of Two Cities, and The Hobbit. I don't remember the details of those books. So I used AI to say, my 6th grader has a literature final coming up. Here are the 4 books she read. What questions could I ask her that would trigger memories for her to think about what she learned and what she could do to demonstrate to me that she has the knowledge of this? So it came back and gave me questions to ask her about character development, about different scenes, about how the Hobbit relates to Julius Caesar, that relates to the Tale of Two Cities, which relates, etc., to the 4th book. And so she and I were able to have a dialogue where I was empowered to help her succeed by knowing the right questions to ask in an environment where she didn't look to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to just give her the answers. And what's interesting about it is I actually had a call come in while we were doing that. And I said to her, I tell you what, why don't you read this next question and answer? I got to take this call really quickly. I went and took the call. I came back and she said, Mom, I'm not learning by reading it. I'd rather you ask me the questions where I have to think about it. So if we really give our kids the chance and believe in them, they can make the right decisions. So in this case, she didn't want to read the AI answer. She wanted the AI answer to be something I could challenge her on for her to demonstrate her knowledge. But can you imagine, Vivi, the single mom or the single dad who's working a job, who's trying to put food on the table, who's trying to help their kids see a better world through their own education, and being able to come home and leverage AI to help them be prepared to help their kids do well in school? They may not be able to afford a private tutor, but now guess what? They've got a tutor at their fingertips on their phone that they can use that allows them to engage with their children in a whole new way than was ever possible before. Those are some of the advantages of how AI can really help, but it does come back to modeling it, celebrating the effort, being intentional, and taking a new path. Because for many of us, right, it was only what we knew that we could share. But now as parents, knowledge is unlimited if you know the right questions to ask.
I like how you really make the balance of letting your daughter use all the tools, but make sure she actually did all the exercise, the practice, right? So the math is actually a mental exercise. It's like you go to gym, right? So like that is how she trained her own mental muscles before she turned to ChatGPT for further guidance. That's a great example. So back to discovering AI, could you share also some stories where families went from feeling overwhelmed to empowered?
I was just in Texas doing a talk, and I had a parent tell me the reason why she came is she is so tired of the nightly screen time challenges with her son. There's just no separation between the device, and she feels she's lost him, and she wants to make sure she doesn't lose her daughter who's younger than her. And so post that event, I shared with her some different activities she could do with her son that would empower him to be part of the process. And it was, I tell you what, let's come to dinner. And you may have seen the this was going around on social media very virally. Create your own superhero inside a shrink wrap package, right? And so it was like, have that conversation with your son. Show him how you all as a family could talk through this technology and create things together that you could laugh at, you could be silly about, you could share, what are the superpowers you have or they have. And the mom wrote back and said, Amy, it's been amazing. I finally have a language I can use that is relatable and is one that doesn't need to be confrontational about whether or not you're using your device or not. It's about moving from the consumption to creation. It's about saying, let's not have to fight about how many hours you're on the device. Let's talk about what we're doing when we're on the device. Let's talk about how we can do different activities that allow us the means by which to take our learning and our understanding and our own creativity to new levels. I had another parent that talked about, I really, my child loves to watch Shark Tank and wants to start their own business. How can we do that? As we talked about how you could leverage AI to expand upon the initial ideas and to think through all the various steps that would be involved. And so now all of a sudden, this young little girl has an opportunity to think about, how do I want to do this new business, this necklace building and this bracelet building business that I want to do? It was her idea and her opportunity. But through AI, she was able to really think through, well, how could I market it? How could I drive it through? What are my cost structures, right? Those sorts of things. And the parents are like, I had never been an entrepreneur. I was a librarian. I don't know much about entrepreneurship. And she totally loves Shark Tank. Empowered me as a parent to know the right questions to ask and to help her think about it. And I didn't have to feel in her mind inadequate, or to use her words, stupid. I'm like, nobody is stupid. We know that. But sometimes parents can feel that if they don't have the answer for their kids, that they maybe aren't worthy, aren't adequate. And we need to help parents let that go and let them discover the answers together. And so for parents, this is really a chance to say you want to be that wind beneath their wings. And this is really a recognition of whether it's at a youth level about being very intentional about the activities that you do as a family and that you encourage your child to do, or even if you have older students who may be graduating from college, knowing that for many of the colleges they have not allowed the students to use AI. What are you doing to help make sure that last cherry on top of the sundae is all set for your child as they're about ready to go into the workforce? That they have the tools necessary to become AI irreplaceable. And that's a big part of what we try to do.
AI irreplaceable. You need to change from the passive consumer to proactive creator. You also work with grads and young professionals through your flagship program called the Standout Graduate. So could you tell us what are these young people struggling with the most nowadays?
Well, they're struggling with the fact that they grew up in an environment and an education system that shared information with them, and they need to demonstrate that they could actually parrot that information back. The reality today is companies are looking for people who can come in and be truly entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial, that they can take initiative, that they have the mindset of lifelong learning, realizing that the competitive edge for companies are ones that actually figure out a better way to solve the needs or to come up with new products that customers and companies need. And so the graduates today really need a combination of two things. They need to know how are companies using AI today, because companies are at a much higher adoption rate of AI than that of individuals in the US. And it's pretty true globally as well. We're at about 75+% adoption of AI in corporate America, but we're in the 2030s as it relates to individuals. And so these graduates need to know, all right, how, beyond Grammarly and beyond spell check, how are companies that are doing sales or marketing or accounting or finance or engineering or operations or HR, how are they using AI in their daily activities and in their communication flows? Because there's not a class in college right now that actually covers this material. So that's a big part of what we do is we actually help the graduates understand how is AI being integrated today and helping them think through what are the prompts and the tools that they can use to demonstrate that they are digitally literate, that they have an interest in lifelong learning, and that they're comfortable testing the potential of AI to improve work outcomes. And then we also talk about entrepreneurial mindset, about what it is CEOs are looking for today. CEOs today are looking for the people that are going to be able to be the change makers of the future, not the people that are going to follow the industrial education, industrial revolution of following, an assembly line. This is very much about speed to market, speed to opportunity. And so how is their emotional intelligence? Have they learned how to effectively communicate? Are they willing to talk face to face, or are they only comfortable talking through text? The reality in the workplace environment today, once you're out of college, is this two-way worldwide global workforce of how do you create the connection and the understanding? That's what they're looking for. And then in addition to it is how do you help the young graduate think about their own progression, their fast start in their first 90 days, what they should look to try and learn in their first year, and how do they position themselves such that they are viewed as employees that the company wants to invest in to have them continue to grow, and or for the young graduate to realize what skills do they want to learn so that if they choose to go somewhere else, they truly have transferable skills that will matter in their next role.
Sum it up a little bit. One is definitely the AI literacy, like the digital literacy, the financial literacy, but also the mindset, right? All the traits that you mentioned, adaptability, entrepreneurial, EQ, and compassion to prepare for the success in the age of AI and the skills that we need to grow ourselves into. And it's for parents too, lifelong growth. So
Also, I mean, we do need to be realistic. that, for portions of the population, their COVID experience is still playing a role in how they grew and developed. And that's part of, the added pressure associated with this graduating class and the graduating class before it and a couple more still to come, is the need to really ensure that we are raising young people that can thrive in a digitally driven environment where truly human skills are what's going to be truly valued.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like there's a lot, right? For them, it's like, oh my God, I need to have this skill, I need to have that skill, I need to be like super smart and also very human. So, what advice would you give to a 20 something trying to find a purpose and trying to come to terms with who they are in this AI world?
To my 20-year-old self, I had, I could write down on a napkin on a whiteboard exactly what my career trajectory was going to be, every stop along the way, and what I was going to accomplish. And the reality is, there is no linear line. Your life is filled with a whole bunch of ups, downs. You just want to make sure ultimately it's up and to the right directionally. So, my advice to my 20-year-old self is keep being hungry. Keep being focused on lifelong learning. Keep being focused on your goal to make a difference in the world. And opportunities will present themselves. Be willing to walk through that door, accept the challenges, and just simply do your very best. It doesn't matter what your major or your degree is in, or what your true financial or family background situations are. Each and every person has the opportunity to say, I'm going to make a difference in the world. I'm going to leverage my mindset and my abilities and my interests and my commitment to lifelong learning to really grab a hold of this vast opportunity in this rapidly changing world, to see an opportunity to have an incredible life ahead. And so I would say, don't worry, focus on having impact, making a difference, and you're going to have an amazing life and career ahead of you.
That's great. Big, courageous, and anti-fragile, right? Resilient, like you said earlier. I'd like to ask you our signature questions for our Tech with Soul series. What does tech with soul mean to you?
Yeah, so tech with soul means to me, it was a great question, and I was so glad you asked it to me, because I really kind of just took a step back to think about it. Tech with soul to me comes down to the recognition of how inherently precious it is to be human, and how we can leverage technology without losing connection to our values and to our belief systems, and ensuring that what we do makes a difference in the world for all. So tech with soul, to me, is very much that inherent inside your gut or your conscience, helping you think through and believe that anything and everything you do can make a huge difference for the world. So go out there and make it happen.
Brilliant. I mean, for those people who are watching or listening, how can they follow your work or support the movement?
Perfect. Well, thank you for asking that. I'd like to encourage people to go to discoveringai.com. By going there, they can subscribe to our newsletter. They can grab our book, Raising Entrepreneurs, Preparing Kids for Success in the Age of AI. They can also sign up for a free workshop, whether that be for parents or whether that be for recent or current college graduates. They can also join our learning circles, which are for kids, adults, and families, where we provide educational material on a monthly basis for it. We also do custom programming for employees and employers and schools, as well as companies looking to take advantage of AI inside their organization. So that's where you can find all that information on discoveringai.com. As I mentioned earlier, we also have a sister organization, which is discoveringai.org. That is our 501c3. For there, we have a multitude of free resources that are available to parents. Everything from how to apply or to understand where your family is on its tech journey, to family AI values frameworks, to integrating an entrepreneurial mindset. So there's a whole bunch of free resources that you can take advantage of at discoveringai.org.
Brilliant. So finally, before we go, what is the one small step, a practical step for any family or any individual to take this week or even today to start building these right moves in the AI-driven world?
I'm going to take it back to the point of view I have around creation over consumption. And I'm going to say every day you can ask the question, instead of saying, how was your day? Just simply ask the question, if you could have created anything today that would have made your day better, what would it have been? Just get in the mindset of thinking about what could be. Not how was your day, which is very backwards thinking, reflecting on what was. Shift it to forward thinking and say, what could you have created today that would have made your day better? I totally prescribe to the 10 bad ideas a day, keep running it through, work that muscle, work that entrepreneurial mindset. Be forward looking, forward thinking. Every single person can simply ask a coworker, a friend, their family member, drive to school, drive home from work, calling your parents. Simply ask yourself, what could have made your day better today? What could you have created today that'd make your day better? Get in the habit of thinking about creation, because with AI, the only limits truly are what we as humans can imagine as possible.
Brilliant. And that is actually what makes us human. This imagination, the sky's the limit. And now with AI, we should be even more empowered. Thank you so much for the sharing and the insights. Thank you, Amy.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate the opportunity to share thoughts about what it means to discover AI.
That was such a powerful conversation with Amy Love, a reminder that preparing for the AI age isn't just about understanding technology. It's about nurturing courage, creativity, and connection, starting right at home. Whether you are a parent, a young professional, or simply someone trying to navigate this fast-changing world, Amy's message is clear. We all have the power to lead, to create, and to raise the next generation with intention. You can find Amy's work at discoveringai.com and be sure to check out her book, Raising Entrepreneurs. We'll link everything in the show notes, including her workshops and programs. If this episode moved you, please share it with someone who needs it, a fellow parent, a teacher, or even your younger self. And don't forget to subscribe to Vivi in the Valley for more conversations at the intersection of tech, soul, and the future we are building together. Until next time, keep creating, keep connecting, and always remember the most powerful technology we have is human.